Welcome to the January 6th Parks and Natural Resource Commission meeting. First thing we'd like to do tonight is approve the agenda. Commissioners, staff, is there any additions to the agenda?
Nothing from staff.
Okay, next item is we're going to look at approving the minutes from our December 2nd work session. Is there any changes, staff, commissioners?
Nothing from staff again.
I move we approve.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, now we're going to look at citizens' comments. Being there's no one here tonight to have any comments, we'll move on to a review of, approval of the 2020 Parks and Natural Resource Work Plan. Tonight, JJ will be presenting that.
Good evening, Commissioners, and welcome back to another year of our Parks and Natural Resources Commission. Every year in January, we take a look at the work plan that we discussed the month previous. And what we'll be looking for tonight is your approval on this work plan. Again, most of the information here should be information we've already discussed unless you went home and found another topic or thought of another idea or something came to light that we should be looking at or discussing. And then we'll have to take a look at that and decide if we're going to approve that here tonight or add that at a later time. Annually, Commissioners, you have these 5 items in front of you that we work on each and every year, or we hear about every year. The review of the capital improvement plan for park development, renovations, and trail work. And that will be coming later tonight. Our Natural Resources Department brings before us a deer management plan and talks about programs and strategies. I apologize, Commissioners. Are you all getting the ringing and
A little feedback.
okay. Kenneth, if you have a chance, could you help us out? Thank you. It's a little bit better. We ask that you provide input on the city's stormwater pollution prevention program, and then you'll also hear from staff on the state of the lakes. And then annually, there's a sustainability progress report that Sue Bast and her team present to us, which is usually some really good information that sometime in the middle of summer that they finally gather up all their information and all their numbers and stats and things like that. So these are the 5 items that are before us on an annual basis. Now, last month we took a look at our special projects. We came up with, I believe it's 13 or 14 items that either are carried forward from the year before, or they're an item that staff already has knowledge of that's going to be coming before you, or it's an item that you folks think that we need to dive into a little bit farther. So the list here, we're going to review that final design of the Lake Marion Trail, the south segment. We're going to review concept plans for Lac Lavon Nature Play Area, and we're going to update you on the accomplishments from our Parks Master Plan. Again, this will be the 3rd year, I believe, that item is on our list, so maybe we'll move that forward to the other list of annual happenings that we go through every year. As well as we're going to provide you with any information where there's opportunities for you to promote Burnsville Parks during any of our events or any special things we have happening in the parks. So with that, you also asked for updates on the 35W Minnesota River Bridge bike crossing. Garrett Beck is going to present to you next month information on our Parks Frameworks plan. We're going to review the Nicollet Commons Park Water Feature Rehabilitation Plan. There's some additional sustainability information that Sue would like to present to you folks as well. You asked for an update on the County Road 42 and Medical District corridors and the impacts on city parks and natural resources. You've asked for an update on the Emerald Ash Borer project as well. We first heard about that, I think it was probably 2015 or a few years ago, 3-4 years ago. And Dave Gramish, our city forester, will be happy to give us some update and some numbers on how we've been doing. You've also asked for an update on our scheduled or programmed recreational uses in city parks, and as I told you last month, we've got some great information that we'd love to share with you on that. Information on any invasive species we have in the parks, and then we also talked about the amount of buckthorn that we've removed to date from all of the various parks. The last thing I have listed there is an update on the Minnesota River pollution prevention programs. There was some concern that, from a news report or an article that the Minnesota River was facing some pollution concerns, and we'll bring you information on the programs that are in place to prevent that from happening. So these are the projects that I have listed here in front of you. There were some projects that we discussed that, after further review with other city staff, we've pulled them out or set them aside. One of them, or these three that I have here in front of you, the process of tree trimming in parks. I believe somebody asked, what's the process, and how do you decide which park gets treatment and which doesn't? Dave Gromish again told me he'd be happy to share any of that information as part of that Emerald Ash Borer update. It's really not a scientific approach to it, so he said he'd be happy to do that at any time. We talked about nature preserve building with educational programming and opportunities, maybe with that building near the Fen or down at Cliff Fen Park. And talking with Garrett, he thought that from our discussions regarding the trailhead out at Kelliher Park, maybe that's something that could be tied in there, as well as additional interpretive signage that we can take a look at adding that in any of our parks almost at any time. So it's not that it's not a priority for our parks and natural resources folks. It's just that it maybe doesn't need additional attention or special call out here at the Parks and Natural Resources Commission. The other thing, or last thing I have there, was information or interest in the pollinator conservation fair. And folks, we can do that. We can participate in that in any way. If you folks are interested, we can find a way to get you there as part of that. So again, it's maybe not necessary as part of our annual work plan, but it is something that if there is interest, I can certainly assist, or our natural resources folks can certainly assist in providing that information for you individually or getting you in attendance at that fair. So. With that, folks, that is the work plan that we discussed. I do know, because I did receive an email, that there was maybe some additional items that have come up since our December meeting, and I'd be happy to hear those now, and as all of you would, and we can talk about whether or not it's appropriate for us to approve the work plan here tonight. If we don't, we could still approve it at our February 3rd meeting in time for the city council meeting the next night on the 4th. So I believe, Commissioner Shannon, you have some information.
Yes, so there was a recent news report about the decline in bats due to white noise syndrome. And one of the things that I would like to see is, well, how does that impact Burnsville and our surrounding community? I know I have quite the bat population in my backyard. So I'm just curious on how that affects us.
Can you say more about the pollution?
The white noise is a kind of a mysterious disease that's killing the bats off.
Okay.
In the caves, particularly, it's happening quite a bit up on the Iron Range. But they're also finding it was just found in South Dakota, there's some in Wisconsin, and it's leading to a drastic decline in the bat population. And then bats help the farmers by eating, of course, the pests off their crops, which is then now increasing the need for pesticides.
So the white noise pollution comes from man-made?
No,
We don't know.
It's white nose.
A white nose.
white
It's a
It's a
fungal
fungus.
thing.
Yeah, it's a fungal.
Now I remember.
Yep.
I kept seeing it as noise.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Yeah.
Any other comments to that or questions?
There is new endangered species rules for addressing northern long-eared bats, which are a forest summer roosting bat, that I think is something that can affect all sorts of different developments, and it's the kind of thing that needs to get checked off, make sure that there's compliance with those rules. And that's separate but somewhat related to white nose syndrome, although the white nose syndrome mostly is going to be cave buildings, mines, kind of roosting locations where there's concentrations and there's a buildup of the fungal stuff in the guano sometimes, and they can spread it around. It wakes the bats up all night long or all winter long and causes them to waste unnecessarily use their food and water reserves. And so they end up slowly running out of reserves and oftentimes dying. There's been something in some places out east, there's been 90 to 95% loss in these locations. And I don't know how much bad conservation opportunities we have in the cities, but that would be worth looking at.
So JJ, maybe I could ask a question. Would this be more of like a special project? Because this isn't something that is normally done within the city of Burnsville in terms of looking at the management of bats, or would this be more of an informational brief?
There is not a bat management program happening in the city of Burnsville. It would be more of an informational
Okay.
presentation to you folks and identifying or addressing whether or not it is a concern or what the concerns might be for bat populations here in Burnsville.
Okay.
And to add to that, like, is there anything we can really do as a city regarding it?
I would be okay with adding, I guess I would motion to add as like an informational brief to our current work plan. But then anything further would be decided at that point in time.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Any other additions? Questions or comments? Okay, then I guess it's time I'd like to make a motion to approve the Parks and Natural Resource Work Plan for 2020.
Seconded?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, so it carries. Next item, JJ's going to present to us, he's going to do a review of the 2020 Parks CIP for us.
Very good. And again, Commissioners, just to back up for one quick second, we'll ask that our new chair and vice chair present this information to City Council for their approval of our work plan and the council's meeting on February 4th.
Thank you.
Okay, so Commissioners, as I mentioned, one of the annual things that we do is we take a look at the city's Parks Capital Improvement Plan for each year. And when we get to the end of this review, what we'll do is, it's not a motion for council to approve it because the expenditures have already been approved by council. However, we will make a motion in support of proceeding with the items identified here in the Parks Capital Fund, so that our city staff can go out and get these items checked off the list in 2020. So the Parks Capital Fund has 5 areas, and in the background, I left a couple out, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. But the first one, and probably the largest one that we have to discuss, is park renovation. In that we have just over $1.3 million identified in these areas. So general amenities, which include picnic tables, bleachers, and benches, things like that, there's $25,000. We have some backstop fencing replacements, $35,500. Hockey rinks, $75,000. Those are the boards and the fencing that go up on the rinks. Lighting systems at Neal Park and Sue Fisher. That's probably a replacement plan to bring those lights up to new standards. The sign project. These are the park entrance signs and kiosks that are up in some of our parks. We just finished adding 3 kiosk signs that were originally scheduled for 2019. So there's now a kiosk at the trailheads at Terrace Oaks East and Terrace Oaks West, as well as there's a third one out there that was just added. I'll come back to that. But anyway, they just went in last week. They look very nice, and they're very similar to the kiosk signs that are up down at the boat launch and across the street over at the skate park. The biggest item here is the Nicollet Commons Park water feature. And as I mentioned, this is another item that will be coming back to you. That water feature has been losing water every year, and we've done some studies to find the problems, and now we've got to do some work to repair that water feature so that we're not just pouring water into the ground and losing water on a daily basis. So that rehabilitation project is, as you can see there, $780,000. The other item that we have on our list here is our frameworks plan. So staff has been working probably the last half of the year to identify amenities in the park that are really no longer in use or valuable to the individual park. I think one of the items that came up, an example for you folks, was when we were talking about Kelliher Park and how there's a picnic table up there in the trees and in the wood line that we thought was going to be a great place for folks to stop along their way and on their walk. Well, it might be, but it's also used by others for additional or other purposes that are not very park friendly. So we start talking about where are there park amenities or things like that that should be removed or replaced, and what should that replacement be as we move forward. Currently, there are no longer as many kids playing baseball and softball in our city, so we've got a lot of ball diamonds that maybe there's a better use for that. Soccer, lacrosse, rugby, things like that. These are also items that were brought up in our Parks Master Plan, and so with this is kind of a carry forward from the master plan and making sure that the items in our parks are being used the way they should be used, and that that's what the community wants. So Garrett will be here next month to talk about that plan, and the $50,000 or near $50,000 identified here is just really a plan to get us started in creating that plan for how are we going to move forward and tackle all of the items that we listed. I mean, we went park by park and identifying each of the things in the park and whether or not there's a real good use for it or if it's being used and things like that. So Garrett will have some great information for us next week, or next month, I'm sorry. Bituminous projects, there's nothing planned for 2020. No new trails, no replacements, no repairs, things like that. Park improvements, these are basic amenities. New amenities to the park system. So again, when we talk about benches and bleachers and things like that, we have $20,000 identified. And then we've got a sunset pond. We're putting in a drinking fountain this year at $15,000 for that cost. One of the things I believe I left out in the background, was the technology and security. Now, we work very closely with our IT department, and so these are IT funds that they then put into the Parks Capital Fund. So there's $60,000 identified to extend fiber out to some of our parks. Unfortunately, I don't have that list of parks for this year. That hasn't been generated yet. And then there's also technology endpoints for those parks. So some of them, like Loch Levon and the beach, we've got computer systems in those parks because we have concession stands and things like that. So it's identifying some funds so that we can put some things in place at some of the parks and things like that. So another $30,000 identified there. Again, trail systems, there's nothing planned for 2020, and the Kelliher Trail, the trail through Kelliher, was identified in 2019. So identified that in your background as a carry forward, although it's not listed in the budget of information that you were given as part of your background there as the attachment. So, commissioners, I identified a couple of these things during the presentation earlier, but these are items that we know are going to come back to you at some point during the year, or we hope that they get back to you at some point during the year. The Nicollet Commons Park water feature is one of those things that they're going to want to take a look at, I believe, this spring or first quarter, as soon as they can get into the ground. So that should be coming March or April. Loch Levon Nature Play Area, we've talked about this. We talked about how great the nature play area is over at Terrace Oaks and how we need to maybe create a few more of those around the community so that more folks are getting that opportunity. There is nothing planned yet for Loch Levon, so hopefully we'll have something in place for you to review by, I don't know, early summer. And then again, that frameworks plan that I've been talking about that Garrett will be bringing to you next month. So with that, commissioners, again, what we're looking for tonight is a motion in support of the Parks CIP for 2020. And knowing that these other items will be coming before you, or these items that I listed there, will be coming back to you at some point during the course of the year.
I just have a quick question. When you were talking about technology in the parks, it just made me wonder, are there security cameras in any of our parks?
There are. We do have some. We have cameras at a few parks and in a few locations, some of them in buildings, some of them in parking lots, some of them in just general play areas. And last year, or the last time we added new technology to the park, we added at Alamagnet. It was a few years ago that we had a stolen city vehicle. A Parks truck was stolen from there, and they broke into the shed where all of our baseball field maintenance crew offices out of during the summer and things like that, and did some damage in there. So we do have security cameras in about 7 or 8 parks right now.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, are there any other comments or concerns?
I had a question. Since you've identified a dollar amount for the Nicollet Commons water feature, have you found the leak?
Commissioner Donaldson, that's a great question. I believe they have found the problem. I believe that they've identified that, and I believe that they have the fix in place for that dollar amount. I'm sure that things will look very different once they're actually on top of the problem. But.
Okay, any other questions?
For the signs, I see that 2020 is last year with a dollar amount next to it. Does that mean that we anticipate completion of the signage kind of renovation or transformation, whatever you want to call it, at the end of 2020? Or would we anticipate to see some additional funding being rolled over into 2021?
Commissioner Newman, I believe that 2020 will be the end of our sign project. There were, you may recall, staff member Julie Dorshak was the person that brought the sign project forward. She has left us in 2019, and so some of the sign projects were not completed in 2019. So I guess they may still be working on signs in 2021 because they'll have a lot of work to do in 2020 in order to complete them. But we've already discussed all the dollar amounts, and I've identified all the spending for the sign project through 2020.
Great. My only other question is, you have the irrigation systems on here, and I know that we don't have like a future topic about this. So is this merely upgrades to the current irrigation project? Is there any opportunity to think about recycled rainwater for some of these different irrigation projects instead of just replacing the current kind of, I'm sure, standard irrigation process?
Sure. Commissioner Newman, again, thank you for identifying that. I did not, I failed to mention that, I should say. It again. I failed to mention that North River Hills is our largest soccer complex. We have 4 full-size soccer fields there. The entire turf area is irrigated. There are over the years, the soccer club has supported improvements to that park and turf and the soil conditions there as well. But that system is aging. And so it is time to replace it. They've done a number of repairs over the years to fix breaks and sprinkler heads and become more efficient and things like that. And so as we replace it this year, that does include becoming more efficient in how we use that water and the controls that will tell us that the soil needs water and things like that. I'm thinking very similar to what we did out at Loch Levon at the ball fields there when we did that replacement. It would include that type of replacement. Now, whether or not they've looked to find reclaimed water from nearby ponds, whatever, I'm sorry, I don't have that information. But it will include using the best technology we can afford.
Great.
To irrigate that turf area.
Thanks for that detail.
Okay, if there's no other questions, can I get a motion supporting the implementation of the 2020 Parks Capital Improvement Plan project?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those against, opposed? Okay. Next item on the agenda is we are going to look at electing a chair and vice chair for 2020. JJ, do you want to
Yes,
lead the
thank
discussion
you
on
again.
that?
So commissioners, every year in January, we take a look at electing a chair and vice chair for the upcoming year. The chair and vice chair serve through January 2021, so they get us through that first meeting of the year, of the new year. But every year when we bring on new commissioners in the middle of summer, June and July, it's helpful that we have already in place our chair and vice chair to get us through the year. So that's why we do this work in electing our new chair and vice chair in January. So we are at that point. I did ask, or did inform you in December that if anybody expressed, or if anybody wanted to express an interest, I would take their name and nomination at that point in time. Nobody spoke up. I did say in the background that you were welcome to send me an email or give me a phone call, and I haven't heard from anybody on necessarily a firm commitment on wanting to be that chair or vice chair until just tonight. I did hear from Commissioner Woolman that she would be interested in serving as vice chair for the 2020 year. But other than that, I have not heard or have not received any other nominations. So at this point, I would like to open it up for nominations for a chair and vice chair for the year.
Well, as the outgoing vice chair and interim chair, I would make a suggestion. I think there's, it helps to have some experience up, being on the commission. So I would like to nominate Jenny for the chair and then Shannon for the vice chair.
Sounds good to me.
I like that.
Okay?
Commissioners, are there any other nominations? Hearing none. I would accept a motion in favor of Jenny as our chair and Shannon as our vice chair for the upcoming year from any of the commissioners. I would
So
accept that.
move.
Very good, thank you, Gary.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Congratulations.
yes. And next, we're going to look into miscellaneous with JJ.
Commissioners, our next meeting will be held on Monday, February 3rd. We do have items already on our docket for February 3rd. I also hope that I will have a full list of our monthly schedule for you for the rest of the year at that meeting, so that will be hopefully included in your next packet. And then I would also like to point out that the Recreation Department is hosting a Polar Fest on Saturday, February 8th at North River Hills from 11 to 2. I will remind you again of that in February, but I wanted to make sure that it gets out there a couple times.
What does Polar Fest entail?
We have, there'll be the sledding hill at North River Hills, you can skate, there will be food trucks, we have some of our local youth hockey programs playing some mini-mite hockey out there at North River Hills. We will have a horse and carriage ride going through the park, bonfire and snow painting, all kinds of fun stuff. Should be a good family event.
Sounds fun.
Guarantee good weather.
Guaranteed good weather.
Could I get a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our meeting.